I think Pauline has introduced our next speaker on a number of occasions during her presentation. Our next speaker is Tammie King. Tammie King has a science degree from the University of Melbourne, majoring in zoology. She's currently doing a PhD here at Monash University, and as Pauline indicated, I think the focus of her PhD is looking at desirable characteristics in dogs from an owner's perspective, and Tammie's going to talk about that topic now, once she's organised.
Thanks, Paul. Hi everyone, so today I'm going to be talking to you about identifying ideal companion dogs for Australia. So I basically just want to continue on with Pauline's theme and talk about, just reiterating the points basically raised about dog ownership in today's society. So as you've heard from Pauline, there's actually a heap of benefits of owning a dog, but our world is actually changing and dog ownership can be affected. So, for instance, people are living closer together, perhaps meaning reduced backyard size. People are living in apartments. They're working longer hours, so perhaps they're not spending as much time with their dog. And basically the dogs are having to fit in. There's also community concerns about dogs who pose a danger to the public and or other animals, so in the case of dog bites, for instance. And the response from government is that legislation is becoming increasingly restrictive, making owning a dog more difficult. So, for instance, restrictions to off-leash areas and things such as breed-specific legislation. But in addition to that, dog welfare is also being affected. So some dogs can develop behavioural problems and the relationship between the dog and the owner can break down. And a lot of these dogs are actually relinquished to shelters, as again Pauline mentioned. 30% of these dogs are euthanized in shelters. And it's important really that dogs and their owners are being suitably matched. Also, many of the previously desirable behaviours, so the types of behaviours that we were once selecting for, the hunting, herding, guarding type behaviours, they're becoming less relevant in today's society, and some people are actually finding them to be undesirable. So it's important to know that how a dog behaves in the community is vital to its place in human society, and it will directly affect the legislation that's being imposed. So then the question is, how can we improve the relationships between dogs and owners? Well, first of all, we could be improving dog-owner matching. So making sure that people obtain dogs which are suitable for them and their lifestyle. Again, as Pauline mentioned, and a really important point, it's imperative that people are educated about dog behaviour and training. So people need to be made aware that how they behave will impact on how their dog will behave. And this can in turn affect the relationship that they have with their dog. So therefore, as a start, what we could be doing is finding out what characteristics people want and need from their pets in the modern world, and what behavioural characteristics people consider to be important. And then what we could be doing is developing tools which can describe individual dog behaviour accurately. And today I'll be discussing these last two points. So what characteristics are ideal today, and how we can start going about developing some sort of tool to accurately measure dog behaviour. To determine what characteristics people consider desirable in companion dogs today, a questionnaire was developed. And we distributed this questionnaire over a period of 2 months in 2008, and data were analysed from 877 participants. And what we found overall is that owners perceive that a dog's health and behaviour are actually more important than how it looks. So not surprisingly, people want a dog which was friendly, safe with the kids, affectionate, calm and obedient. And this really seems to make sense because, as Pauline also said, the most common reasons for relinquishing dogs to shelters included undesirable behaviours such as aggression, destructiveness, etc. Now, these characteristics relate quite strongly with the canine personality trait amicability. Now, amicability consists of factors that are called friendly, easygoing, non-aggressive, relaxed and sociable. But how can we measure dog behaviour? Well, there's actually quite a number of dog behaviour assessments that exist already. Most of these are in working dog organisations, and so such as the police, the military and guide dog associations, and they are used to basically assess the working aptitude of these dogs. There's also assessments in welfare shelters, so to gain information on a dog's behaviour prior to rehoming and to assess that dog's adoptability. However, very few studies examine dogs from the pet dog population. Those that do actually focus on single problematic traits such as fear or aggression, the kind of undesirable behaviours I guess breeders are trying to breed out of their programs. And none of these are aimed at identifying the factors that the dog-owning public want. So taking the results from the questionnaire that people want amicable type dogs, we're setting out to see if we can identify these types of dogs, identify these amicable animals. What we also know is that many behaviour assessments that do already exist haven't been developed using a systematic scientific approach. And it's really important that the correct steps are taken when developing an assessment. So what's important in an assessment? Well, first of all, the assessment really needs to be objective, and that means that any bias from the tester needs to be removed, so the results aren't based on emotion. So I guess if you're looking at your own litter of puppies, it's probably not a good idea to do that. You should be getting someone else in to do it. Secondly, the assessment must be accurate, so it needs to be measurable. It's also important that it's valid, and validity concerns the extent which the measurement actually measures the desired behaviour in question and how it can predict behaviour in the outside world. The assessment must also be reliable, and reliability refers to how repeatable and consistent the measure is. And lastly, it's important that the assessment's feasible, especially if it's going to be used by organisations outside of you using it. So it must be easy to administer and safe to use. So basically what we know is that measuring any form of animal behaviour involves adhering to specific guidelines. So we think by undertaking the correct approach when developing an assessment, it's expected that any problems that arise with the reliability, the feasibility, etc., they can be resolved. So what we did was develop a behaviour assessment, and we've called it the Monash Canine Amicability Assessment. And it's a protocol which measures a dog's behaviour in response to meeting an unknown person during a choreographed sequence of events. The testing conditions, it's video recorded. There's a few subtests to the assessment. The owner will be present and absent in the assessment, and the dog will be both on and off lead. The conditions are also standardised as much as possible to ensure that the only variables that alter during the assessment are related to the dog and the owner. Now, it probably doesn't sound that complicated to you, and some of you may be wondering whether or not it's enough to tease out any meaningful information. So I'm going to show you a few video examples of the assessment now. And that's just a diagram of the assessment, as you can see. Right. Okay. Okay, so there's pre-recorded voice instructions, and that again is to keep the assessment as standard as possible. Every dog and owner are experiencing the same thing. There's a stranger located at the end here, and this is the initial part of the assessment, so the dog and the owner are asked to enter the arena and stand in front of the white chair. It's really important that the owner's not interacting with the dog. We really want to see how that animal behaves without any input from the owner, so no talking to it, eye contact, etc. So now the stranger's been asked to approach the dog and the owner. He's instructed first to have a chat to the owner, ignoring the dog at this point. Also, have a think to yourself also. I've mentioned what amicability is, and it consists of friendly, easygoing, non-aggressive, relaxed and sociable. And if you were to rate this dog on amicability, have a think about how you'd rate him. So once the stranger's had a chat to the owner, he's then asked to call the dog over to him. So again, in a standard manner, he calls the dog. If the dog approaches, or is close by in this case, he will interact with it again in a standard manner. So patting along under the chin, across the back and down one hind leg. Okay, so that